I feel like the word legend gets thrown around often these days when you're talking in hip hop discussions, but DMX is someone who truly represents a hip hop icon who not only was, powerful through his music, but also as a person, as Earl Simmons, the man himself was just always genuine and that always shined through his music. So, I mean, we haven't spoken about DMX yet on the podcast and we kind of waited to give it some time to breathe because, I don't know about you, but for me, this loss really, it hit me deep, to be honest.
It did, and he's a legend. He's a fucking icon. I mean, if you understand what he did, not only for the New York scene, but for the whole scene as a whole, and the amount of people that have been influenced by his music, and I would say the amount of material that has been created around his sound and around this content matter is absolutely ridiculous. And I think once you start diving into DMX's music, you start to understand the raw ability he has to paint vivid but dark pictures. I mean, one thing I do say about DMX's music is that it's a very tough listen. I find, you're going to challenge yourself when you go through his music because there's a lot of dark concepts and there's a lot of dark content matter, but what it does is that it allows you to find certain silver linings that he wants you to find throughout either his storytelling or through his song structures.
Yeah, and before we actually get into the episode, guys, let us know in the comments your favorite DMX memory. I mean, there's so many iconic moments from, the 99 Woodstock Festival.
That's
where
crazy.
He's performing in front of like 400,000 people. There was even, stories. There was one story that was actually really fascinating that I heard about Earl, and it was that he was kind of, chilling around one night. It was like 12:30. Went to a Waffle House.
Yeah.
Ate some waffles and saw a guy mopping the floors and had a good conversation with the guy. Got to know him a little bit, and then the guy's like, "Yeah, I've been working all night and I have my shift till 4 a.m." And DMX is like, "Oh fuck! Like you've been working like a 10-hour shift?" The guy's like, "Yeah, it's been pretty rough." And DMX grabbed the mop and said, "Have a seat. Let me take over for you for a bit."
Yeah,
and he took over the guy's shift, man.
That's crazy. There's always humble stories about DMX, and what's also inspiring about DMX and his legacy is the amount of great interviews that he's given and the amount of insight he's given. I mean, we've posted a couple of his interviews on our IG page, and there's just some content matter that he talks about. It's just as I said before, the stuff that you find in his music could be extremely dark and could be extremely tormenting, but the beautiful part about it is that there's always a silver lining, and I think that's what DMX wanted people to understand is, not to necessarily avoid the bad and the dark, not necessarily to put it aside and not understand your pain and your torture, but to sort of embrace it and understand that, the sort of environment that we're living in on Earth right now is actually hell. And I mean,
he was transparent, right?
He was extremely transparent throughout his music. And I mean, if you look at, the sort of content matter that he was putting up as well, I mean, it was revolutionary to talk against your record label. I mean, he was one of the really, I feel as the first rappers, especially with that sort of platform, to talk about the record labels and to talk about how he sold his soul to the devil. And I mean, that whole concept was really popularized. I feel as if, at least, I mean, there's probably guys that did it before, but to my hip hop knowledge, DMX was one of the first guys to do that, and that's what I appreciate about his music.
Yeah, he definitely was, and I mean, what's cool too is that like DMX lived a full life. The guy experienced the lowest of lows and the highest of highs. I mean, he was homeless, living in the streets at one point, with like 12 pit bulls at his house. He had a super rough upbringing, and I mean, then he started kind of beatboxing at the age of 14, started rapping, doing some freestyles. His friends would gas him up, and then, eventually he ended up signing with Def Jam and came out with, his debut album. And in 1998 with, It's Dark and Hell is Hot, and then Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood, he had 2 platinum albums in the same year, and he was the second rapper to ever achieve that feat after Tupac. So, I mean, it's mind-blowing to think about the impact that he had. And what I think really made DMX kind of explode onto the scene in 98 is the fact that after Tupac and Biggie had passed away, there was kind of an absence of emotional and vulnerable hip-hop. And DMX kind of brought that back to light with the passion that we got through his music. And he kind of filled that void. And, aside from kind of, let's say, the shiny suit era that was kind of coming up in the late 90s, he was the voice of the streets.
He was, and it was extremely raw content. I mean, if you look at the scene at that time and what was coming up, you know, you look at Jay-Z, you look at Nas, there was more of a cadence to it. There was more of a glitz and glam. There was more of like, they were competing for the King of New York while
Yeah.
DMX was really trying to put out content matter that was reflective about his life and his ideologies and his morals. I mean, more than anything, I feel as if DMX is going to be looked at as a philosopher in his in later years, just because the types of ideologies he was bringing to the table. So, example, looking at the concept of heaven and hell, and looking about how, you know, you could really get trapped in certain types of dark areas if you're not solely looking at your whole situation. Like, that was content matter that people were really not rapping about at the time, and DMX, especially with that sort of commercial platform, was able to push that. And you know, cool enough, he I mean, a lot of rappers back then, especially in the 90s, the Source put them on, and it was always in the
Yeah.
unsigned hype column. I mean, I think that was the same situation for Biggie as well.
was.
That's how he had gotten figured. That's how he'd gotten found out. But you know, DMX had gotten a lucky break like that, and I mean, if you look at what he was able to do with those two studio albums in '98, I mean, it's probably regarded as one of the best runs in hip hop history. The way that he was able to take over the New York scene and the whole hip hop scene as a whole was absolutely beautiful.
Not only that, sorry to cut you off, but how many artists can you really name to me in hip hop that have released two classic albums in the same year?
There's very few.
There's very few that have done it.
There's very few that have done it, and not only that, but in the style that he was doing it. So there's something I also want to talk about, and that's, you know, his story, his obviously his iconic flow and delivery. I mean, if you look at about how the cadence and strength that DMX came on with a track, I mean, I listened to his music, and you know, the grumble in his voice, the sort of the raw emotion that he puts out onto a track. I think there's very few people that are able to match that energy like he did it, and he was able to do it in a way where, you know, it didn't sound like it was too much. Like, it was almost as if DMX was sitting across from me, from like where you're sitting, and he was talking straight to me, and the sort of things that he would present in his music were completely, you know, transparent, I would say.
Not only that, but he also had the ability of sometimes kind of changing his flow from one bar to the next. And that was kind of revolutionary when I first heard DMX. And I mean, look, the way that he would dominate a track, I don't think anyone has ever had kind of that dominant track presence like DMX has had. And that's because of, you know, just his vocals and how commanding he is, how convincing he is, and also, you know, him embodying kind of that dog persona, you know, him barking on a track, him howling like a wolf. That was kind of unheard of before him. And I just appreciate kind of the passion that he always put out into the music. And what really sold me on DMX when I first got into him was the fact that he really sold me on his persona. There's not many artists, I would say, in hip hop history that have really sold me like DMX has. The other people I could think of is, let's say, MF Doom, who, you know, obviously has had one of the best alter egos of all time.
Smalls is up there.
Biggie Smalls is up there. 50 Cent.
Yeah.
And the fact of that is because you know that these people had true life experiences that correlate to the music.
Apparently, he got into very, very bad drug addiction at a very young age, and I'm not sure if you've ever seen that interview, but it's extremely raw, and it's actually really sad.
Have you heard the actual story behind it?
I have never heard. The only thing I did heard was that it was actually his mentor that had gotten him into crack, and that's essentially what had started the whole addiction.
It's messed up, and he had like an interview with Talib Kweli, and it's super hard to watch because, you know, DMX is nearly tearing up, saying how like this guy gave me my biggest passion in life, which was the music. He, you know, gave me that chance to be a rapper, but at the same time, he introduced me to crack cocaine and kind of laced a blunt with crack, and I was only 14 years old.
Yeah,
like it's fucking devastating. And you know, some people say, oh, you know, DMX has been an addict all his life, but you know, fuck that shit. Unless you know someone who's been through addiction and kind of the cause and effect of that sort of situation, you shouldn't be talking about it, because it's something that, you know, that DMX has struggled with, and it's not even his own fault. You can't blame him for that.
No, you definitely can't. And he was such a beautiful soul. Going back to like those interviews and like just listening to him speak, it was knowledge on a different level. And regardless of the addictions or the demons that he was facing, he was very transparent about it. I mean, if you think about how drug addiction is such a taboo in the industry at the moment, like you barely hear artists come out and talk about their addictions, or you know, talk about the sort of trials and tribulations that have came out about their drug use. And what was crazy about DMX is that he was completely transparent. He didn't give a fuck what people thought about him. And like, it was something where he not only spoke about it, but he embraced it. And he really advocated for people to be like, yo, make sure you watch how you move. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, watch the type of people you revolve yourself around, because I made those mistakes, and now watch what happens. I mean, go back to Damien example. Like, that is one of the perfect tracks for this, any hip hop fan, I would say, that's trying to get into DMX's discography. I mean, if you look at the type of subject matter that's going on in there, it's basically the whole parallel with his life about how, yes, he was able to get the money,
fame and the money.
the fame, the music success, but at the same time, like, he had to pop his partner. You know what I'm trying to say? And like, at the end of the day, like, maybe that it didn't go down that way. Like, I'm not sure about that, but just the parallel of having to give in to the riches and the indulgences, of life, while having to sacrifice your soul and hurt your soul. What's really worth it at the end of the day? And that's what I feel as if is extremely prominent within DMX's music. Is what are you weighing? What are you weighing on your scale? What are you looking at? And throughout all of DMX's interviews and all of his music, I feel as if he was really more going towards, yo, I just wanted to be a good person, and I wanted to spread a positive message.
100%. And it's super sad to have seen him pass, because he was on that path to kind of bettering himself, and apparently Swiss Beats had said that he was working on kind of getting back in shape and kind of putting out the album Exodus, which is coming out in 2 days from the time by the time this episode comes out. And he said that he was gonna put out that album. It was probably gonna be one of his last, and then he was gonna focus on kind of raising his kids and setting up some good lives for them. So he was just, obviously we don't know him, but from all the stories we've heard, apparently he was just one of the most genuine people in the industry. And like you were saying, he was never afraid to talk shit about the labels, and that's something that I respect him about. And there was even an interview he did, I think it was in the late 2000s, and he was saying how the album I'm about to put out is going to be one of my last, because it's actually costing me money to make music at this point, because the label is making me pay for hotel accommodations, they're making me pay for studio time. And he was pretty much saying, how labels trap artists in a hole and kind of, squeeze out the most they can out of them for their own profit.
And how do you feel about that as a whole, especially with, the amount of knowledge and the amount of, let's say, I would say, stories that have come out, especially now that we're in 2021 and we kind of know how that whole business runs. Do you feel as if it's something that people should start avoiding, or is it something that maybe should be fixed in the future?
It definitely needs to be fixed. I mean, we're seeing so many artists like Russ, for example, see, amazing success without a label, by being independent. But at the same time, I mean, not all these artists, let's say, have the marketing dollars to get their music across. And that's when a label comes into play. But look, if it were me right now, obviously you need a distribution deal. That goes without saying. But if you can, do your music and do it independently, then that's amazing.
Another thing I feel as if for artists, and I know we're going a bit off topic here, is just, DMX. Well, DMX was always advocating against record labels and really trying to tell people, like, listen, don't sell your soul and try to make this shit as genuine as it possibly is. And especially in this day and age, I mean, you could see how those ideologies are transpiring right now. And, the amount of, I would say, technology and marketing opportunity that artists have, especially with the way, let's say, rollouts are done, and the way that you'd be able to actually hire your own publicists and do your own merch runs and do all of your own digital marketing. I mean, if you look at what someone like Nipsey Hussle was doing and the way that he was setting up a modern blueprint, not the blueprint that Jay-Z set out in the early 2000s and the late 90s, let's say. I'll go even a bit.
Nipsey was patient, man.
This guy was literally grinding out every single fucking dollar he had and created an absolute empire. And you saw that the way, that way was going to transpire in the future. So, I mean, if it wasn't for DMX and the sort of stuff that he was advocating for back then, and especially, Jay-Z was big on that as well, create your own wealth, create your own blueprint, get your own future and become an owner. Who knows, where people would be right now and the type of inspiration maybe they took from these artists.
Yeah, and hopefully, we see a trend in the future where artists are kind of more individual minded and have the right and the positive influences when it comes to, collaborating with labels or whatever the case may be, just to better their own future and have control over their creativity at the end of the day.
Oh man, creativity is everything, and that's something DMX definitely didn't lack. And I mean, going through his music, as I said before, it's going to be extremely dark and you know torturous. But I mean, you're going to understand a lot of shit that you maybe have not understand before, and the amount of knowledge there is to gain through a DMX album is absolutely crazy. So you know, looking at it's dark and hell is hot. You go through that whole track list, and it's 19 tracks, okay, and it is so tight and concise.
Is this your favorite DMX
Oh,
album?
definitely.
It's mine too.
It's definitely
mine too.
it's definitely my favorite DMX album. For the reason being that I think it was the album that introduced me to DMX. I wasn't alive when this album dropped, but I mean when I started listening to hip hop and I started going through classic albums, example like 36 Chambers, Illmatic, Ready to Die, Me Against the World, like all the classics
Yeah.
that you have to go through. This was something that I'd stumbled upon, and especially when I was getting into Kendrick Lamar, there was something that had come out where Kendrick was saying like this is probably one of my biggest influences and someone that really shaped my music and sort of guided me through not only my music but personal life. Now I was like, okay, now I understand his impact because now it's someone that I could relate back to and I understand the original link from that.
Exactly. And not only that, but speaking of Kendrick, he actually admitted that like the main inspiration of Lucy off of To Pimp a Butterfly came from Damien, which has been a character that we've seen all throughout DMX's discography. So and a lot of people don't give DMX the credit for being, I would say, an influential artist, but he definitely is. And, we're also seeing artists like Denzel Curry who are completely inspired by DMX's flow and delivery. And we saw it on a song like Diet where, that aggressive delivery is just, taking precedence. And it's amazing to see how many artists have truly been inspired by him over the time.
Yeah, you go through this album, you'll see a lot of sounds that become prominent in this day and age by a lot of your favorite rappers. I mean, think about what, Rough Riders Anthem did for the whole hip hop scene and how that blew up shit. I mean, absolutely crazy. We spoke about Damien and the storytelling in that song. That's crazy. Look Through My Eyes. I mean, that's probably one, probably in my I wouldn't put it in a top list just because I find that's unfair and that changes for me every single day, but definitely one of my favorite hip hop songs of all time. You look at Crime Story, you look at the skits like Mickey, and let's say I have The Storm on here. Just looking at this track
The Storm,
list.
I want to speak about The Storm. That's one of my favorite skits of all time.
Okay.
And I love it because, it's two guys talking and one of them says, I'm hearing about this guy DMX and how he's robbing people, but he has so much money. He's a big artist. Why is he robbing people? And the other guy says, you'll never have enough money to be rich in this world. And that just fucking stuck with me. And it really showed to me how DMX values kind of the concept of money and how money's kind of corruption to the soul in a way.
It is corruption to the soul. You can't. I mean, just the action of acquiring money itself is something that will deteriorate your soul. Because if you think about how shit has gotten so commercialized and how there's these social norms in order to make money and be of a certain stature, it will go against your morals and your values. And that's, for me, at least in my reality, what my soul means is everything that I believe in and stand for. And regardless if you're an owner or not, you're still probably gonna have to go against your soul to be able to make money in this life. And that's just facts, and that's stuff that he's advocating for. Is that, yes, okay, listen, we're all in a fucked up position, and in this album, you'll probably find it a lot. DMX is saying, listen, I'm really not in a good position in my life right now, regardless of the type of fame or money that I'm putting up, but I'm still aware of the things that are going on around me. I'm still conscious of shit that's happening to me and happening to my soul, but I will never let it get to there, and I will never let it corrupt me as a person. And that's what I fuck with about this album.
Yeah, and what I found genius too, if you look at a song like X is Coming, it kind of starts off with this creepy lullaby of, a chant of how DMX is going to come for you in the night.
Super spooky.
And then you get 3 different verses, and each verse is a different slaughter of where DMX is essentially murdering someone, and he gives you gruesome detail,
it's crazy.
man.
The first verse is the first verse is probably the most gruesome for me.
It's shocking, and it shows you this music is super cinematic because it was kind of a reincarnation of Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street. On Elm Street, that's what it kind of reminded me of, and I'm like, DMX is selling this persona to a T, and he's making me believe every word that he's spitting.
Listen, I'm gonna read out the chorus to "Let Me Fly" because this is probably one of my favorite choruses of all time. Either let me fly or give me death. Let my soul rest, take my breath. I don't fly, I'ma die anyway. I'ma live on, but I'll be gone any day. So think about how fucking deep that is. Just not only on like a hip hop level, but just on a personal level. Like, at least what that means for me is, if I can't fly and reach my full purpose in this life, and if I can't reach my full potential, I mean, first of all, that's not even an option for me because I'm gonna get there anyways, and I'm gonna fly regardless. But if I'm not able to, fuck it, I'll die anyways. I can't see myself going anywhere besides my full potential, and that's the sort of attitude that DMX had throughout his music. Is like, fuck what people are saying, like fuck what people are talking about you, like screw all that. Like that has no context here. Look at yourself and really try to achieve these steps in your life that are going to be able to get you to this greater
Yeah.
potential. And that's something that's extremely prominent in my life right now. Is like, trying to figure out who I am, especially like, being in your early 20s. I can imagine how hard it is for so many people, especially, with everything that's transpiring. That's a sort of content matter and support that you could find within a DMX album. And that's what I love about it.
Yeah, and to me, that song kind of just represented, him wanting to be free and wanting to have that freedom throughout his life. Another standout for me is "Look Through My Eyes,"
Beautiful.
where he kind of takes you through a day in the life in his shoes, and he says like, "If you would walk in my shoes, your feet would hurt."
Yeah, you wouldn't survive.
Yeah, you wouldn't survive, and it's him saying like, it's kind of a message that someone like Tupac would say, in the sense that it's like, only God can judge me, and you may see me act a certain way and do certain things, but only God can judge me, and nobody is better than someone else, and you can't really understand me until you're walking in my shoes.
I'm going to read this chorus because it's beautiful again. Look through my eyes, see what I see, do as I do, be what I be, walk in my shoes and hurt your feet. Then know why I do dirt in the street. Like it's this whole thing of like people having prejudgments towards DMX's persona. It's kind of like, how are you gonna judge me on my personal life, and how are you gonna judge me for what I do outside of music if you don't even know me as a person or know my circumstances? And I feel as if that's also a big problem within society. Is like people will look at you and automatically have this prejudgment of you. They'll have this little fictional story in this rabbit hole that they've already gone through in their head, and they automatically attribute it to you. And like that's what DMX was also talking about. Is like, you can't sort of get consumed by that type of shit. You can't get consumed by the hate. You can't get consumed by this negativity, because if all you choose is to see is negativity, then that's what will truly transpire, is that negativity. But if you choose to find that little dot of light throughout all that darkness and throughout all that hate and throughout all that sort of torture, you will be able to find something beautiful at the end of it. So it's inspired me in a way where I apply that to my life and my everyday, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me and it resonates with me.
You know what's crazy, man, is that DMX popped off in '98 and he was 27 years old.
Yeah.
Like, it took him some time to get into the position that he had to get to, and that just comes down to kind of self-motivation and pushing yourself to your extreme lengths to achieve what you want. And another song to me that also has sticked with me for a long time is "How's It Going Down," and to me that's like his version of, let's say, Biggie's "One More Chance," because it's someone that you don't really expect to do an R&B track, but pulls it off beautifully. And not a lot of people might know this, but if you look at Drake's Views, the song "You With Me," Drake pretty much redoes that whole hook and does it his own way. But it's just cool to see how Drake recognized how iconic that hook is and brought it into a new generation and kind of introduced it to a whole different audience, because it's truly one of the best kind of R&B hip hop tracks that I've ever heard.
It definitely is, and it comes from someone that you don't expect to have that sort of thing going on for him. And what's crazy about that track too is like, you low-key still get the DMX flavor and like the DMX like sort of a rough persona throughout it, and you still get that cold delivery. But then again, it's still super iconic in this track list because it adds that diversity to it. Like, he was so good as an artist and so good at crafting these songs. It was amazing. It was almost like he was a wizard. Like, that's what I don't understand about it. Is like, you read his writing and it sounds like it comes from a scripture or like something of a holy power. Like, that's what's crazy is that his words literally provide you value that you can't even imagine. And another thing is that he's extremely selfless throughout his music. So, talking about his transparency, I mean, if he doesn't give you all of these personal anecdotes and stuff that a lot of rappers are afraid to put into their music because, they don't want to seem a certain type of way, or they're afraid that it might corrupt the music, or, it might ruin their music. DMX wasn't afraid to do that because that's what DMX did.
Yeah.
DMX was someone who built his whole musical career off of being raw and genuine, and that sort of content matter stuck throughout his whole discography.
100%. And I mean, what I love too about DMX is that he was a very spiritual guy, and we saw that throughout his entire discography, because on all of his albums, he has a prayer track, which is, him kind of pleading to God, asking for guidance and that sort of stuff. So I love that. Those are always highlights on every DMX album for me.
That's facts.
And going back to It's Dark and Hell is Hot, the convo, which comes in towards the end of the track list, really ties in the whole concept of the album to me. And that's where he kind of raps about being filled with rage and revenge due to his circumstances, and him pretty much battling his demons in life. And he has a line where he says, "Somebody's knocking, should I let him in?" And that's kind of the temptations in his life. That's kind of the devil, which is who he's battling and who he's trying to keep away, but who's kind of always there. And that's something that he's admitted, that like the evil and the good has always kind of been a combination that's been present in his life, but he's always tried to, stick to the good, and he feels like that's kind of taken control of him for the most part. And I just love to see that, he seemed at peace with himself towards the end, man, because, I mean, he even said, I don't know if you watched the actual Drink Champs podcast with Noor.
I did.
But he said, like, I could die today and I would be happy. And I just love that, he was in that place where he felt no regret. He knew that, he had helped people, with their mental health issues through his music, and he had done so much, not only for the hip hop community, but for the people around him in his life, man. It was great to see that he was in that kind of headspace.
A very, very, very deep thinker. I was watching that interview and I was really taken away by it. My bad, my water bottle fell. But I was really taken away by it because I was like, whoa. The guy's almost at the end of his career, and like he still has so much value to give. Like this guy has so much knowledge to spread and to prosper. It's like, fuck it, man. He was taken away from us way too soon. Like, I would have loved to see him roll out Exodus. I would have loved to see him roll out Exodus just because, like, it wasn't the case where the album was unfinished.
Apparently, he completed it.
He completed the whole project before it actually went down. The whole event went down, and like, it was just like, fuck. It would have been so cool to see
him get his flowers after almost 10 years of not dropping music
and make that comeback.
100%, man. And I feel like, that's one thing that, bothers me as a hip hop fan, is that I feel like, people never truly gave him his flowers while he was here. I mean, people definitely cited him as being a huge influence and all these sort of things, but he deserved more of an outpouring of love just for his impact on the game. And, speaking of Exodus, 13 songs got announced in February when he went on the Drink Champs podcast. And if you guys haven't seen the interview, he seems so excited about the album. Like, he was really happy for the world to hear it. And the title Exodus actually comes from the name of one of his newest sons, who's named Exodus, and he actually has that tattoo on his neck. And I believe that's the album cover for this project. And if I'm not mistaken, there's actually features on every single track on this album. So how do you feel about a DMX album coming at this point? I mean, it's only about 2 months after his passing, and kind of, the whole concept for it.
I love it. I'm super excited for it, especially when I'd seen the types of features we were going to get on here, man. I mean, it's always cool to get new DMX music because, as you said, it's nearly 10 years we haven't gotten a project from him, and he went back to Def Jam and ended up, he was able to sign a deal to get out one more studio album. And what's cool about this is that he was able to actually complete it. Like, this is not a posthumous album. It was released posthumously. It's going to be released posthumously. But the thing is that all the content and material was created by him before he sadly passed away. And I also like that everything is kind of being executive produced by Swizz Beatz as well. I mean, he's a legendary producer, and he's
been around for all of DMX's career, right?
Absolutely. So, I mean, if you look at what Swizz Beatz has done for the New York scene and hip hop as a whole, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I would like to see some Swizz Beatz narration on this as well. Like hopefully seeing some stuff like that and seeing where we could go from it. But I mean, I love the fact that they didn't decide to like drop it like 2 weeks after or whatever it is. Like it's the summer approaching. He probably had this date saved in mind, and it's probably dropping at the time they wanted to drop it at. And I mean, regardless, like that's a camp that's so focused. I mean, if you look at the type of people that showed up to the hospital while he was, I believe he was in a coma, and the people that showed up and like everyone,
The whole Rough Riders crew
it was just
playing,
beautiful. Like
blasting his music outside the hospital.
it was like I actually got a tear and I was like, fuck man, like it's crazy because that's the sort of flowers that he deserved. Like that's what DMX deserves. So what were your initial thoughts when you had seen the track list, and especially with the type of features on there?
Listen, I'm going to take you through all the names because this is, one of the best track lists I've ever seen. And what's interesting too is that, if you look at DMX's discography, he usually has little to no features on his albums. Usually he'll have like a feature from the Locks, for example, and that's about it for the entire album. So to see him have a feature for nearly every single track, it's pretty cool to see that, how he's going to kind of connect with other artists. I am sad that they couldn't get the Pop Smoke feature to work out because that won't be on the album. But just check out this feature list because it's pretty wild. So we have the Locks, we have Jay-Z, we have Nas 2 times,
Fire.
we have Lil Wayne, Moneybagg Yo, Alicia Keys, Bono from U2, Griselda.
Nice.
All 3 Griselda members on one track.
Beautiful.
Snoop Dogg, Usher, and a couple other names. It's one of the most kind of rounded feature lists that I've seen in a long time. And like I said earlier, I'm super interested to see how DMX connected with these other artists and kind of the chemistry that he's going to have with them.
Well, I would love to see the Bono and Alicia Keys vocals on here. I think that's always appreciated on any track list. I mean, whenever you get Bono vocals or Alicia Keys vocals on your project, I mean, it's an automatic W. Looking at the Nas and Jay-Z features, beautiful as well. I mean, Jay-Z did start collaborating with DMX in '98, so that was cool to see how he brought him back over here. I am interested in seeing the Griselda crew coming on and doing their thing over here, and it's nice to see how it's not like scattered. Like all of this sounds super focused. Like all of these rappers low-key fit in that criteria.
Not only that, but DMX has good taste, man.
He does.
He's reflecting on kind of this new generation, and the guys that he sees, worthy of him collabing with are like that Griselda crew, are Moneybagg Yo, and these are artists that are kind of taking the industry by storm right now. And apparently Swiss Beats was saying how the reason why these artists chose to collaborate with DMX is because they just wanted to see him win.
Yeah.
Which is fucking beautiful, man.
It is beautiful. Fuck, man. It's nuts, though. I feel as if everything happens for a purpose. I feel as if everything happens for a purpose. Like, this is going to be a beautiful fucking moment for DMX. Like, he's going to be looking down and, like, he's probably going to see this and be so fucking happy that the world is going to be able to gain beautiful knowledge out of an album that's coming out. And, I mean, as we said, like, it's been 10 years. It's been 10 years. I mean, if you look at the sort of troubles that he went through with his record labels and how he got fucking shafted all like, left, right, and center, it's crazy because he is such a talented artist. And if he didn't have those issues, who knows where his discography could have went? Who knows the type of longevity he would have been able to have.
He was independent at one point. He was signed to a label and he wasn't signed. Like his kind of, career is just, regardless of all the ups and downs, it's just legendary, man. Like he was the first artist to ever have 5 #1 albums in a row. I mean, who could you say that for?
No, there's pretty much no one.
There's nobody.
There's really nobody.
History,
And he was doing this at a time where like marketing was nearly not like it wasn't as sophisticated as it is now. And to think about how he had commercial success with the sort of content matter that he was rapping about is even more mind blowing. I mean, think about how rappers are now, especially in 2021, so reliant on selling pop records in order to get their streams up, or let's say juicing and beefing up their track list with 30 tracks in order to get their streams up, or releasing a 17-part deluxe album just to be able to get maybe 2 more hits that even cracked the top 50 on the Billboard. This guy was doing it with solo projects that literally made the world stop and stare and listen to what he had to say. So that's what I'm even more inspired about.
Yeah, and it's just going to be beautiful to see, kind of like I said earlier, the outpouring of love that he gets, when this album releases. And I just hope that people truly appreciate the icon and the legend that DMX was.
Thank you guys for watching the whole video. Hit that subscribe button to join the family. We're doing weekly reviews. We're giving you guys all the updates in the industry. Plus, we have our series called What to Expect, where we actually take you through the album before it drops. Plus, if you guys want to chat with us, you guys could join our Discord server. The link is in the bio. You guys could talk hip hop with us there. Thank you guys for watching again. And guys, I'll see you on the next one.